Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to dominate your career, then you are in the right place. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, ex-Googler, diversity expert, and senior corporate leader. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success. Welcome to the Beyond Barriers Habits and Hacks Show. Do you have a career-related question that you're uncomfortable asking your peers, managers, or mentors? Well, we're here to address your questions. Our fear of being perceived as inadequate prevents us from asking, but it causes us to pay a high price in every aspect of our lives, in lost income, slower career progress, limited access to leadership roles, and potential risk to well-being. So learn to ask and start by asking us. So here's a question we get from many of our listeners. How do I negotiate?
Well, what strikes me about that question is what it's not saying. The question isn't how do I negotiate for what I want or how do I negotiate for more? It's simply asking how do I negotiate? And to me, the underlying subtext in that is should I even negotiate?
Mm-hmm.
And well, the short answer to that is yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You should always negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
But what the bigger question really is in that is why do you assume you can't?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you don't have the skills or the experience, then by all means, focus on getting the skills and then come to the negotiating table. You should never feel entitled to things that you haven't earned yet.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do have the skills, if you have the experience, the passion, the commitment, and you know you will absolutely deliver outstanding results, then you owe it to yourself to get what you're worth and what you deserve.
Mm-hmm.
So now that we're clear that you should always negotiate,
Yes.
let's talk about how to negotiate, whether it's for a new job or a promotion. From a corporate hiring perspective, Monica, you've been on the other side of the table.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear your perspective about negotiation in these circumstances. What have you seen?
Well, I mean, I can attest to this, and I remember wondering, if what I was experiencing was true. So I remember doing some research, and I was astounded by the research that I found. So I want to share some of these statistics to show people that this can be detrimental to your career if you don't negotiate. So research suggests that 20% of women never negotiate at all. And like I said, I can attest to that. I mean, there were countless times as a recruiter that we'd extend an offer and the women would just accept it on the spot. And 9 times out of 10, when I would extend an offer to a male, he always came back with a counter. And so I don't know what it is, but women just never wanted to negotiate. Now, here's the startling research and the numbers. A woman who opts not to negotiate her salary upon graduation gives up about $7,000 in her first year. And over the course of a 45-year career, will lose between $650,000 and $1 million.
Wow.
That's a house.
That's a mansion.
Yes.
That's not just a house.
It's
$1 million
crazy.
mansion is what you're leaving on the table when you simply start off at the wrong starting salary.
Exactly.
Right?
When you don't negotiate
your first job, when you don't start off with the right compensation, you end up losing a mansion over the course of your career.
Of the year. Yeah, if you don't recoup it somehow. And so the researchers, and one of them was a Harvard research, they started asking and polling men and women, what do you think about negotiation? And men saw it as some fun, competitive, winning a ball game kind of analogy.
A fun experience.
Exactly. And women most times categorized it as going to the dentist. And so as you can see,
it's a painful experience.
Exactly.
Nobody wants it.
So they shy away from it.
So that challenge of the difference in perception about negotiation is what often prevents our desire to even engage in it. So as you can see, our attitude towards negotiation, how we feel about it, whether we think it's going to be a fun experience or it's going to be a painful, horrifying, traumatic experience,
right, exactly.
prevents us from even engaging in the conversation but the impact to that over the course of a career can be really exponential, because the gap is relatively small at the start, but over time it starts to get wider and wider, which means it gets harder to make up for that gap, and the negotiation actually gets more complex over time. And that makes it even harder for us to make up that gap. So I think that's the key takeaway, is that start to negotiate when it's actually easier to close the gap.
Right. But it's easier said than done, right? So, Nikki, you've had tremendous success as a negotiator. And by that, I mean not just negotiating salaries, but you are like a professional negotiator, that you've done it as a profession, right? So, what are some expert negotiation tips that you would share with our listeners?
Well, negotiation is a very deep subject, and it takes years of mastery, especially if it's your profession, right? So there's people whose literally their job titles are expert negotiators. So we're not going to dive into that, but there are absolutely certain things about negotiations that would be helpful to anyone in any situation, not just when it comes to compensation or jobs, but in general, a mindset about negotiation. So let's talk about some of those myths. What are, some of those myths about negotiation?
Well, myth number one, negotiation is about conflict.
Yeah, that's a good one, because when you think of it like conflict, it automatically brings up discomfort and fear and anxiety around that. Because you don't know what you're getting into. You're afraid that you're going to hurt someone or upset someone. And you literally, you have no idea what to expect. So you often then avoid it. People tend to avoid conflict.
Absolutely.
And so if you think negotiation is conflict, you're going to avoid negotiation altogether. What I would recommend is reframe negotiation as being about discovery and about alignment. So think of it just as a discovery process. Think of it like dating. When you go on a first date, you really don't know anything about the other person, but you start to get to know them by asking questions, by being curious, by being open, and understanding what's important to them. And so think of it simply as a process. And all it is that they're discovering you, you're discovering them. So reframing negotiation as about discovery, not conflict, is the first step.
Right. Okay. That makes total sense. So myth number two, let's debunk this one. Negotiation is about taking.
Yeah, this is another big one, because when you think of negotiation as a zero-sum game, that it's all about winning or losing, and if there's more for me, there's less for you. For most women especially, no one likes to be selfish or be a taker. So what are you going to do? If you think of it like that zero-sum game, you're going to focus more on giving and thinking that it's all about giving. So you're hesitant to take for yourself. Well, I want you to reframe that as not about taking, but negotiation is about establishing a long-term win-win outcome. And when you think about it as long-term, you have to make sure that you are establishing balance for both parties. And it's absolutely not about winning or losing. It's about winning and winning. So a common example might be that you're afraid to negotiate what the kind of compensation that would really make you happy and fulfilled in the work that you're doing. But you don't ask for that, and you just leave it on the table. You accept the job, and now you're simply resentful over time. As the job gets harder, more is demanded out of you. All that's going through your head is, I can't believe I'm doing it for this amount. I'm upset, and before you know it, you're already looking for the next job. Think about that. That's not helpful to your employer. Instead of focusing on the job at hand, you're busy shopping around for the next thing. And it's not good for you either, because instead of giving your best, you're in a state of resentment. So that's a lose-lose outcome. Instead of a win-win outcome being, have that conversation, even if it makes you uncomfortable, so that you can get what you want that will allow you to focus on giving your best. And it allows the employer to ensure that you are in an environment where you feel valued.
That makes total sense. Well, then I would say myth number three is one that I think a lot of people get hung up on, is that negotiation is about money.
So negotiation is not about money.
Mm-hmm.
Negotiation is about value exchange,
Right.
whether it's on a new job or a promotion or whatever it might be. Don't just think of negotiation as all about your salary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be about anything you value, whether it's your title, where you work from, what your responsibility entails, getting more PTO, or getting reimbursed for education, or when you are eligible for promotion, working from home, getting a sponsor assigned, being able to attend conferences. There's so many things that you could do within that.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's the most important key takeaway is that for our listeners is that you don't focus on the salary, because I'll tell you, as a corporate recruiter, salary ranges can be fixed, and they are, depending on the role and the level that you are vying for. There's going to be a fixed salary range, and so there is a cap on it, right? But always know that the first negotiation that they put out there, the first offer, there's wiggle room. So you should ask for more on the salary front. And if they can't move that much anymore, then you need to focus on the whole package, on the whole compensation, and really thinking about, okay, you could sit there and tell them, okay, I'm willing to accept a lower salary range if we can agree on the entire compensation package. And that can include, like you said, more time off, flexibility, where you're working from. It could be commuting allowance. It could be anything from, I need to hire an assistant. Will you give me a head count for that? I need corporate housing because I'm relocating. I need relocation and maybe at least 3 months of corporate housing. I mean, that could save you thousands in the first 3 months of rent or something. So it's those types of things that aren't necessarily a monetary value, but in the end, you will benefit from that regard as well.
Yeah, so it simply comes down to what is important to you, what do you value, and then what does your employer value, what does that organization value, and getting aligned on that value exchange. But in order to do that effectively, you have to know what's important to you. You can't get something if you don't even know what you want.
Right.
And even more importantly, you have to know what the other party wants.
Right.
If you can deliver what they want, then you have a shot at getting what you want. That's how it becomes a fair exchange. So the next time you're in this situation where you're negotiating for a new job, and you're in this conversation where they're asking you, well, what did you get paid last? Or what do you expect? What's your, salary expectation? Don't start off with just sharing a number based on what you last made and maybe 5% more.
And I want to point out that there's a law now. You do not have to disclose what you currently make or you've made in your last job, because that was leading, where you may be getting underpaid. They take that number and they just bump it up a little bit. No.
Right. A great way to handle that situation is simply to say, my last compensation was commensurate with my last responsibility in the role I held.
Right.
What I'm looking for now, is parity, market parity with the role and responsibility I'm interviewing for in this organization.
Exactly.
And simply flip it back to saying, what is, do you pay on par with the market? And most organizations will want to admit that they do pay on par or above market. Very few will actually say, no, we're below market, because that will not help them attract the best talent. So once you know that they do pay on par or above market, now you can talk about, well, what does that range look like? Where does the offer sit within that range, on the lower end, middle, or the higher end? If it is within that range, and if it still doesn't meet your expectations, then bring up the conversation about, let's figure out how to make the entire package something that compensates for the deficit on the cash component side. What else is important? But in order to even have that conversation, you have to go in prepared with knowing all the things that are important specifically to you, because there's no one size fits all. For someone, education credits might matter more. For someone else, flexibility and more PTO might matter, right? So go in with that list and figure out how you can get to the bottom of a value exchange that's truly, right for you, but also makes the organization feel like it's fair for them too.
Exactly.
So the key takeaway is that negotiation is a discovery process to get aligned on value, so you can ultimately establish a long-term win-win partnership. And the more prepared and thoughtful you are in solving for their needs, the more likely you are to have a successful outcome.
That's awesome. Okay, everyone. So share your comments and takeaways on our social media channels. And if you have a burning question, ask us. This is a safe space for you to get the answers that you need. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode. Thanks for listening. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources referenced in this episode. And be sure to take the quiz on the website. Your score will tell you where you are, what helps you gain momentum, and what holds you back. You'll also get a free guide with cutting-edge career strategies. We'd also love to hear from you. Share your comments and topic suggestions on IamBeyondBarriers.com. And we'll be sure to address them in future episodes. If you enjoyed our show today, please subscribe and rate the podcast, or just tell a friend about it. See you next episode. What if you could figure out exactly how to rise up faster in your career? Instead of wasting time on trial and error, imagine being able to pinpoint what's holding you back, where to focus your effort, and how to get results quickly. That's exactly what the Beyond Barriers quiz is designed to do. You'll get your personalized score based on 25 essential elements to accelerate career success in the digital age. And you'll get a free guide with cutting-edge career strategies that'll help you understand how to gain momentum and dominate your career. The Beyond Barriers quiz takes just a few minutes, but it'll save you months of frustration. Go to IamBeyondBarriers.com/quiz and take the quiz today.